Hi, everybody. I'm Kathy Finesse from the Golden Door, the general manager, and I'm excited tonight to be with Candy Chang. I couldn't wait to talk to her. I happen to have been in Cape Town and gotten to see one of her walls, and we're going to learn a whole lot about community conversations tonight. A beautiful thing happened to Candy Chang one day in New Orleans 2 years ago. After losing a loved one, she came up with an unconventional way of dealing with the grief she was experiencing. She decided to paint the wall of an abandoned building in her neighborhood, using the exterior surface into a giant chalkboard emblazoned with the words, "Before I die, I want to." Within 24 hours, that empty wall was transformed into a giant homepage for personal testimonials. I get super excited about this because community language is just incredibly powerful. As passerbys finished your sentence with their own reflection on life, the final result was a collage of bucket list of promises crafted by anonymous individuals confessing their aspirations to see a daughter graduate, sing for millions, or simply be by themselves completely. For over a decade, she's created participatory experience in the public realm that examine the thresholds between isolation and communities, the psychology of a civic engagement, and how these places can cultivate introspection and kinship. And that's sort of the first idea. Here you were experiencing a personal loss, but you became outward in the community. How did you make that transformation and that leap?
Yeah, well, I started making these interactive experiments in public because I'm an introvert. And it's because I was trying to create a way for the quieter people like me to share just as much as the loud ones. And at first those questions were very civic-minded, and then after I lost someone I loved, I started to channel my emotional questions into the public projects, and that was a leap. And I didn't know what to expect. And I went through a long period of grief and depression during that time. And over time, I felt gratitude for the time we had together. And I found a lot of clarity in my own life by thinking about death so much. But I really struggled to maintain that perspective. I think it's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day and forget what really matters to you. So a big part of it was just trying to find consolation with my neighbors, seeing like, does anybody else feel this way? Am I alone in feeling this way? And so the project was really a big experiment just to see, are there ways that we can open up more with the people around us? Because there are so many barriers to opening up.
It must have been so profound to take that personal experience and then sort of migrate it. I mean, we're not just talking about you migrating it to your community. You migrated to international communities.
Yeah,
that's what's in multiple languages. So how was that sort of evolution from, I think it's sort of an interesting idea, sharing that grief openly and having people embrace you, but then thinking about it worldly?
Initially when I made it, I didn't think it was going to go beyond New Orleans. It was just one wall, one experiment that I was trying, and it happened.
How many countries are you in today?
There are over 70 countries. There's over 2,000 Before I Die walls now around the world.
That's incredible, right?
It's been incredible.
Significant conversations. That's significant.
Yeah, and it's amazing to see how it's run, kind of like wildfire. And I think part of it has to do with, well, when I made the first wall, I received a lot of messages from people around the world who wanted to make a wall with their community. And I posted a few photos online, and then it just spread. So I feel like the project almost grew despite me. And
did you have to go to all these countries?
Well, from the get-go, I thought one of the beauties of this project is that it's so simple to make. It shows that you don't need to have a big budget to make a big impact. And so I tried to figure out ways to make it really easy for anyone else to make a wall. So one of the first things I did was make all these step-by-step guides and resources so anybody could run within their own way. So these walls around the world, they're all spearheaded by local organizations, local residents, local students.
Do you have a wall that once you saw it sort of come alive, that you thought was one of your favorite, that just sort of moved you?
The second wall that ever happened was in Almaty, Kazakhstan, and I actually went there. to make walls with students, and we made them in English and Russian and Kazakh. That was a really incredible experience to see that after just a few months that this idea had traveled across the globe. And soon after that, I really did create all these resources so anybody could run with it. And one of my favorites at that point then was the wall in Brooklyn, where I used to live. It was just a few blocks from where I used to live in the Fulton Street Mall area. They did a wall on construction walls. And you see so many construction walls in our own cities that are often blank and drab. And it was such a great experience to see how they were able to transform into something constructive for the community.
Did you ever have one that was complicated, maybe through politics or?
I think that
Community expression can also be people who sometimes are repressed. They're not allowed to sort of speak out how they really feel.
It's been interesting to see how walls are different in different places too. You know, I knew that they would be really interesting to see how they unfold and whether they're near a school or a church or what. I think that it's been interesting to see the gamut of humanity on these walls, from the profane to the profound. You know, I expected that there are, there are adolescent boys and, and drunk people around the world who also use these walls. But I think it's kind of amazing.
Is there any
to see
common
this
thread?
collection.
Do you see like, oh, every single country gets these 2 or 3 lines? Is there something that you find as a commonality between all of the walls?
You know, making this book, actually, we went through thousands of responses around the world to see, like, are different countries different? How do people respond? What things pop up more? And there were some differences based on depending on the politics of the place. Like, Before I Die, I want to play with kids in North Korea, or Occupy Wall Street. But for the most part, these responses show just how universal our desires are. And across all the boards, these 5 main themes popped up. There were love, family, travel, helping others, and personal well-being. And I think that was one of my favorites. Before I die, I want to overcome depression. I want to be completely myself. I want to slow down for a moment and maybe even stop. I want to heal. I think it made me realize just how much we're not alone as we're trying to make sense of our lives. That was, I think, the most important thing that I got out of it, is just seeing how much I'm not alone. That actually, after doing these kinds of projects, these introspective projects in public, I've realized that we all feel like we're barely keeping it together. That you're not alone in that. And what a tragedy to be in a society where everybody feels like they're alone in that feeling. And how can we create more spaces where we can be more honest and vulnerable with the people around us? After making the Before I Die project, I made a confessions project. And I was amazed to see how quickly people dropped their guards and shared extremely profound, extremely heartbreaking things. And I think that it showed me that I think we're yearning for that kind of space if given the right conditions.
Right,
Right.
Is it difficult to secure the spaces? Are there public sort of rules and things that people who wanted to do these walls, did they have to overcome that challenge?
Every city has different
Right.
rules,
That
so
seems
it's
like that'd be hard,
interesting.
especially in, they might say this is graffiti and you can't do this. And
Yeah, I think it's brought up interesting topics around that, like who has a say in public space, and I think that is a really interesting question to me. That
who does have the say? I mean, obviously the abandoned buildings, you could sort of make a case that nobody really cares, but still someone might.
Yeah, even making the first one,
Right.
I had to, there were some obstacles to go over, and I had to get certain permits to be able to do this thing on an abandoned house that nobody cared about for years in my neighborhood, that was collecting graffiti and dust for a very long time. And so I think it's been interesting to even experiment and see how easy or hard it is to do that. And I think that a lot of our cities these days are based around, I think, a practice of economics rather than a practice of intimacy. And I think that's really important, that more people live in cities today than ever before, but many, many studies say that people feel more isolated than ever. And I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of barriers to connecting with the people around us, and while those barriers remain, it's easy to forget the humanity in the people around us and become impersonal and even adversarial, you know. I think that part of it has to do, I think we know fewer neighbors than we once did, and I think it's easy to be an angry neighbor when you don't know the other person, you know, when you don't feel empathy or kinship.
Well, and the world is so, I think, complicated today, in a sense that there's anger and there's, you know, challenges, and it's a political environment that has its challenges. Are the walls becoming a place where people can sort of express themselves to become closer and to become more one? That you're in our neighborhood, we're not against each other, we're all together.
That's one of the greatest things that I think I have enjoyed seeing these projects unfold, is reminding us how much more we have in common than not.
And not.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, you know, there's this great quote from a guy named James Hollis, who is a Jungian analyst. And he had this great book called The Middle Passage that helped me a lot during one of my greatest existential confusions. And he said that in the end, we are only tiny, frightened animals trying to do our best to survive amid other tiny, frightened animals. And that sounds a little grim, but it always consoles me. And I return to that sentence when I lose perspective. And it's something that I remember when I consider our communities, whether that's our neighborhood communities, our workplace communities, our larger communities, our cultural communities and beyond, that a lot of our personal anxieties and fears extend into our public life. And many of the conflicts in our communities come from this lack of trust and understanding. And over time, I realized that these personal anonymous prompts, they kind of offer a gentle first step towards honesty and vulnerability in public, which can lead to trust and understanding. And I think those are such important elements for a more compassionate society, which can not only help us, you know, work together, live together, make better places together, but can help us live our best lives. You know?
Well, and I sort of ponder for a second and think about, which I know you're in the beautiful cities and the non-beautiful cities, but if you change the verbiage of the wall to say, you know, I wish my city would, or I wish my government would, or, you know, cities like Flint or Detroit and all those kinds of cities, is there some way walls could be used today to actually get people to get together and have the same desire to make their cities great?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can we ask a different, you know, you're just so great at this. You've caused so much emotion. Is there a way to take your greatness and apply it to be almost a solution for communicating in cities that just seem to refuse to communicate?
Yeah, I mean, these projects really started out because I've been to so many community meetings as an urban planner, urban planning background, where, you know, the voice of the community ends up being the handful of people who can make it, or the loudest people in the room. And it made me wonder, how can more people get involved over time, and how can the quieter, shyer people like me share just as much as the loud ones? And so some of the projects I made Before I Die were about ways that people could easily share their hopes for vacant storefronts, share their ideas for their neighborhood. And then also at the Before I Die wall, it has become like this open source project. I encourage people to remix it, run with it however they like, because I think there are so many ideas, opportunities for ways that we could have more open discussions, more accessible, more engaging discussions in public. So, you know, within a month of the wall that I made, the Before I Die wall that I made in New Orleans, I got an email from a guy in Beirut who said, we saw pictures of this wall online and it inspired us to create this remix that says, Lebanon would be better if. Yes. And so many remixes have unfolded since then. Detroit needs more. I go downtown because, I run because, you know, happiness means whatever to me. There have been so many remixes, and it's been so interesting to see how people in different advocacy groups to have run with it to initiate different conversations.
And we've sort of done that here ourselves.
Yes, you have.
You saw our wall? It's actually been up since January. You know,
oh, wow.
In waiting for your arrival, so we would get guests to partake in, you know, I'm grateful for, because we're always thinking about gratitude as something that we've sometimes stopped to think about. What are we really grateful for? You know, like, write it down. And it gives me goosebumps. I'm really grateful for my family. I'm really grateful that I'm here. I'm really grateful I have the time to think. Or it's really sort of powerful. It's been a really great experiment, I have to say. and our
Yeah.
guests write on it. And sometimes our employees will stop and write on it.
I'm glad to hear that.
It's been really interesting. But I think another idea I think that you're starting, what about with students in schools? What about a way that, I see you're starting to work with schools and students, don't you? I'm sure you know, and that's why you're doing it. That seems like just a great way to express themselves in a way they could be heard.
Yeah, I've talked with a lot of students who have made different, made either Before I Die walls or remixes of it, and I think it's been really inspiring to me to see, especially at that age where there's so much more, maybe there always is, but I think especially in high school, so much judgment, right? And so people are that much more afraid to say how they really feel.
I wish people would look at me and...
Yeah, to create a space to see that you're not alone,
Right.
like how it can be an extremely powerful thing. It has been for me, seeing some of the responses on the walls, I think has also really changed my life and helped me in ways that these people probably will never know. And it's been interesting because I think that this area of like mental health, I would argue that all of us have mental health issues. It's not a minority of people, it's a continuum, it's a spectrum. And at certain times in our lives, we all feel stress or sorrow or anxiety or confusions. And it can easily escalate to something more severe, more self-destructive if we ignore them. And I think it's really easy to ignore them because improving our mental health is so much more abstract than improving our physical health. Physical health, the things you have to do, they're much sexier, much more concrete. Improving our mental health, those are much more introspective, abstract exercises. And so what does that look like? Which is why I think I'm really into Carl Jung. I've been really into Carl Jung's work, and I appreciate him because he tried to create a kind of vocabulary and framework to begin to make sense of our abstract inner lives. And one thing that he said that I really like is that neuroses are to be welcomed because they serve as arrows that point to the wound. They show a healthy, self-regulating psyche at work, that neuroses are the suffering of a soul which has not yet discovered its meaning. And I think that's great to remember any time where you feel like you have extreme anxiety or any sort of overreaction to a situation, whether that's annoyance or anger or fear, that could be an arrow that points to a wound. And if you follow that back, you can begin to understand where that feeling is coming from, begin to have more objectivity about your own behaviors and motivations and opportunities for growth.
And that's actually going to be a great place. You once said, what if residents had better tools to self-organize and shape the development of their neighborhoods? With your creative sticker campaign and other things that you have done, have you been able to sort of monitor and sort of see results, like something actually changed to the better? Not just the people, but I wish this was a bakery, or I wish they did this better, or I wish they actually took this down.
Yeah, so the I Wish This project, which was these fill-in-the-blank stickers that said, I wish this was, that I put on vacant storefronts all across New Orleans and beyond.
What was the best wish what was the one that moved you the most?
Well, one of the things I like about that project is that the responses range from the functional to the poetic. So actually some of my favorites are like, I wish this was full of nymphomaniacs with PhDs.
Yeah, there you go.
Or I wish this was covered in bacon.
Right.
But I also like I wish this was a safe place for my kids to play. I wish this was a place for people who could sit and talk. And so that project ended up turning into a larger project called Neighborland, which is both public installations and an online tool. Because there's only so much you can do on a sticker. So I quickly saw what was so amazing about that project and that experiment is that people started writing on each other's stickers, like Me Too, +1.
Or I saw one,
if
you give me the financing, I'll be the baker.
That's right.
One was, I wish this could be a bakery, and the response was?
Yeah, someone wrote, I wish this was a bakery. Someone else then wrote on it, if you can get the financing, I will do the baking. I was like, oh man, that's great. Like, what an amazing thing to have these conversations on these stickers. And quickly realize that this could go farther. You know, how can we push this farther? How can we have a place where you can archive people's ideas and then people can build on those ideas over time? And so we got a grant from Tulane University, the Rockefeller Foundation, to take this idea a few steps further and made this tool called Neighborland. And so people, residents and organizations have used Neighborland to create night markets, to
explain that, night markets.
Night markets. They are markets at nighttime. Sometimes they are pop-up night markets that many little street vendors that people can set up a table, set up their stall, and sell anything from food to art to jewelry, t-shirts and beyond. But many night markets have popped up because of that tool, where people can easily say what they want and see what other people want and click me too, so that one person who wants something in a neighborhood can turn into 10, 20, 30 and beyond. And there's a page for each idea where people can come together, share updates, you know, meeting times and beyond. And organizations have also used it to ask questions like, what do you want in this park, in this building, in this neighborhood, and have run with people's ideas. So they've made community centers, they've organized different activities in parks. They've done a number of different things, and it's available everywhere in the U.S. now. So it's been interesting.
So if you can, with all your creative imagination, where do you see this going? I mean, it's already, I feel, made such an impact. I mean, we have our own fun with the tiny sliver that we've been able to do here. But when you think about all of the countries, are you going to be in more countries? Can you know, is there an end? I mean, what's the next step? How big is big?
To me, I think the thing I'm interested in these days is the relationship between public space and mental health, and how our cities can better serve like the psychological needs, the psychological health of its citizens. And I think about, you know, why are we together in the first place? Like, how did our cities begin? What are our cities fundamentally made of? How have they changed? How have we changed? What have we lost along the way? And so it's been interesting to me to think more deeply about what kind of elements there have been in cities in history. You know, I've been thinking a lot recently about grief, because I lost someone that I loved in January, who lived with me in New Orleans. And it made me think about how strangely we deal with grief here, that oftentimes you're given a week off and then you come back to work as normal. And I think one of the biggest differences between today and back in the day is that we are so much more private with our grief. That grief used to be a very communal thing back in the day. And there are so many communal rituals, communal songs around grieving. Like in ancient China and the funerals, it would be a communal thing where everybody would come out and kind of release their sorrows. And in ancient Rome, people wore dark togas during times of grief. In Scandinavia, you're expected to, I think, take a year off to live in the ashes. There are all these different kinds of communal rituals around grief back in the day, but today, not so much. And I think we've lost something along the way. You know,
and I want to ask you if you think we've lost something else. As you think about those times and cities, and you think of the ancient cities, the buildings were painted multiple colors. I mean, Nefertiti's home and all these homes were massively painted, like what happens inside the caves or the tombs. They're painted with stories, and they're detailed, highly detailed with colors and gold. And today, you know, we talked about graffiti for a second, but I see in many countries today too these paintings on these walls and contests to do the best murals. Have we lost somewhat, because of graffiti taking over, have we lost that form of artistic expression that actually feels good? When you walk by that building and see that incredible piece of art on a whole building, it makes you stop and feel good. Mm-hmm. But that's not a positive thing, because buildings are not painted anymore. They're meant to be blank. Have we lost that as a sort of a slate? Do you know what I'm saying? It's a hard question to think about, but do you think that'll change?
I think it is changing. And I think that's why I say a project like Before I Die has become so popular, because it's so rare for us to be able to scribble in public. You know?
It's so frowned on to even be expressive.
Yeah, yeah, and I think there's something to the, you know, you see it in every like school desk and, well, you know, I was here or whatever,
Right,
you know.
on the tree.
Yeah, exactly. That is this primal thing that we have, is just to make our mark somewhere. And how can we create more opportunities for that? I think there are more and more like public art programs out there, which I think is great, and seeing the value of public art in communities and what it can do and how transformative it can be. So that's exciting to me. Right now I'm working with the Mural Arts program in Philadelphia. They're an incredible program I've admired from afar for a long time, and there's over 3,000 murals in Philadelphia, thanks to them.
Wow.
And I think that is a great
example. Exactly.
Great example. You can't walk a few blocks without bumping into a giant mural that was created really intimately with different community groups around the city. So it's really inspiring to work with them.
That's really cool. What project today are you working on that you're finding the most passionate?
Well, right now I'm working on this project in Philadelphia. I just came from there. I'm going to go back there after this.
Well, welcome to California. It's
yeah.
different.
Yeah, it's been nice to be
Take
living
a break.
Living in warm weather for a while. I'm really excited about this project. I've been working with mental health organizations around Philadelphia and talking with many people about what kind of tools do we use to improve our mental health. People have shared everything from, you know, yoga, meditation, writing, reading, gardening, swimming, dream interpretation, beyond. And it got me thinking about, what if the tools we use to improve our mental health were embedded into the city fabric for the public good? And one tool that's helped me and many others is the I Ching, which translates to the Book of Changes. It's one of the oldest books in the world, from China over 2,000 years ago. And it provides a lot of, I think, practical wisdom and insight that can be applied to any situation in your life. And it's helped me to take the time to think about certain confusions in my life and look at it from different angles. So this mural I'm making right now, it's an interactive mural, and it's inspired by the I Ching. And there'll be like an intro and instructions on the wall, but anybody walking by, you're invited to consider a situation in your life where you're looking for clarity, and then spin this dial on the wall to select one of 64 of these hexagram symbols. And then you can find one of these 64 stories along the wall, these contemporary poetic stories that provide some guidance around this situation you're thinking about. And so the stories themselves and the mural, they're very surreal. They're sort of inspired by Carl Jung's idea of archetypes, that there's a kind of town in your head, that inside each of us there's a prideful king and an innocent child and a student and a teacher and a hedonist and a hermit and a hero and a coward and beyond. And I find that a really empowering idea, that you're not just one thing. There are many parts of you, and different parts of you come out depending on the experience, the situation. But it helps me have a little more objectivity as I consider my behaviors and motivations and opportunities for growth. So they're very surreal. The stories are about this kind of the things and people in this town. And I hope the experience will be kind of like the Twilight Zone for emotional well-being. Yeah, and it'll be up at the end of April.
How has this changed you? I mean, this journey is so incredible. I just took a cough. How has this changed you?
It has.
How has it changed you as a person?
It has made me, I think, listen to myself more, be more in tune to the confusions I have, because every project comes from the questions I have at the moment, and it's sort of a way for me to work out certain questions. And they have helped me with my own mental health, my own psychological well-being. So it has been an incredible way to continue to grow and question. And I think that's the best thing you can do. All you can do is sort of follow your questions at the moment and try something out and see how it feels, and then grow from there.
So I'm going to ask you two questions. What are you grateful for?
I'm grateful for a lot of things. I'm grateful for being here right now. Thank you. What a gift to have me here. I'm grateful for the people that I love in my life. And
So what would you?
what before I die? You know, I've written on many walls around the world, and I try to write different things depending on how I feel. But one thing that keeps popping up is before I die, I want to make a library in the desert. I've taken many road trips, especially out here. I love Southern California, the Mojave Desert area. Just did a road trip through Death Valley. But for me, the road trips have been very therapeutic, and I have been thinking about the idea of having some sort of destination, a kind of pilgrimage, maybe a death library in the desert.
At the end of every single one of our interviews, we ask the same question. And you get to share with our guest your answer to our question. And it's the question of, if we could leave you guys with a golden nugget today, what would that golden nugget be? You've seen so much in the world, you've got to come up with something that we get to take home and that we'll never forget. What's our golden nugget at the golden door?
Oh goodness, the golden nugget.
At the golden door.
I think that I feel like I've always feel like I'm in a good place when I feel like I'm helping others. But no matter what, I think you're in a good place when whatever you're doing, that doing it for yourself is its own reward. You know, so no matter what happens with whatever it is that you're working on, whether it works or not, whether it succeeds or fails, that it has been good for you, you know, and it has helped you somehow learn and grow. And that's something that I think I try to remember all the time. Yeah.
Well, Candy's going to be with us for a few more days. I don't know how many more days, but I know a few more days. At least I think Saturday, right?
I'm leaving tomorrow.
Talk to her quickly. I hope you do take some time to talk to Candy while she's here, because I think this is an incredible subject for us all to talk about the Golden Door. We have so many brilliantly smart women here who are with us every single week. And to pause for a moment and realize that this is something that you may not even know is happening around the world. This whole conversation about community languages, community speak, and community walls, I actually find quite fascinating. And I think it's one of them. I was so impressed when I heard her speak. I said, I've got to have you here at the Golden Door. Because I think the more we do that, you know, one of the things we are is transformational now. You know, one of the things we're doing that's transformational here is we give away 100% of our profits to stop the abuse of children. Most people don't really know that. We've sort of changed this idea of our company that we want to be a community person. It's not just about what happens within our doors, but today we have to all affect outside our doors. And so thank you so much for being here.